What if I told you that the most awakened souls among us aren't announcing their enlightenment on mountaintops? You see, there's a curious pattern that emerges when one truly begins to awaken. Think about it. The more conscious you become, the quieter your existence often grows. But here's the thing. This distancing isn't rejection. It's not withdrawal from life, but rather a profound shift in how one participates in it. We misunderstand this quieting as antisocial, when in truth, it may be the most honest relationship with society possible. The awakened soul doesn't need to proclaim its wisdom. Instead, it creates a gentle space where authentic being can flourish, unencumbered by the constant noise of collective illusions. We have become so accustomed to the idea that spiritual awakening is something to be declared, something that comes with badges of honor or markers of achievement. We expect those who have awakened to teach us, to guide us, to stand at podiums and deliver eloquent speeches about their journey. But in reality, the truly awakened soul often steps back from the very structures that demand such performance. Have you ever wondered why those who speak the loudest about their spiritual achievements are often the ones with the most to prove? And conversely, why those who have genuinely touched the depths of awareness seem to quietly fade from the social spotlight? You see, awakening is not what most imagine it to be. It isn't about gaining special powers or elevated status. It isn't about becoming more than human. Rather, it's about becoming fully human, about shedding the layers of conditioning that separate us from our authentic nature. And when one truly experiences this, the need to be seen, to be validated, to be important in the eyes of others naturally diminishes. Think about it. The very desire to be recognized as awakened is itself a signal that the ego remains firmly in the driver's seat. The truly awakened being recognizes this irony and smiles at it, choosing instead to live their understanding rather than advertise it. I once knew a man who had been deeply involved in spiritual communities for decades. He led workshops, wrote books, cultivated a following. But then, gradually, people noticed he was withdrawing. He stopped accepting speaking engagements. His social media accounts went quiet. His friends worried he had fallen into depression or lost his way. But when I visited him in his small garden cottage years later, I found someone more vibrantly alive than ever before. He hadn't withdrawn from life. He had stepped more fully into it. While appearing to recede from society, he had actually engaged more deeply with reality. His compassion hadn't diminished. It had transformed. He no longer needed to help others in ways that reinforced his own sense of spiritual accomplishment. His helping became invisible, humble, and far more potent. Like a mountain stream that appears perfectly still on the surface while currents run deep beneath, the awakened being moves through the world with a quiet power that doesn't announce itself. We are drawn to the noisy rapids, impressed by their dramatic tumbling over rocks, their spray catching sunlight. But the still, deep waters hold secrets the rapids can never know. Or consider the tree in a forest. The ones that rustle their leaves the most dramatically in the wind aren't necessarily the ones with the deepest roots or the most expansive canopies. Some trees grow quietly year after year, their growth nearly imperceptible day to day. Yet over time they become the silent giants of the forest, offering shelter and sustenance to countless beings without fanfare. As our consciousness expands, we begin to recognize the beautiful paradox that less social engagement can sometimes mean more authentic connection. Less performance can create space for more genuine presence. The awakened being understands that true intimacy with life doesn't always require constant interaction with the social world. Sometimes it demands a stepping back, a creation of space, a quiet distance that allows both themselves and others to breathe more freely. But this distance isn't born of judgment or superiority. It doesn't come from a place of disdain for the unawakened masses. Quite the contrary. It emerges from a profound recognition of our shared humanity, our shared struggles, and our shared divine nature. It comes from seeing that the games we play in society often obscure rather than reveal our true nature. And rather than play along with what they can now see through, they gently step aside. Now, there are three fundamental reasons why truly awakened beings naturally create this quiet distance around themselves. Let me tell you something about the first, the noise of social performance. The first reason awakened souls naturally create distance is their heightened sensitivity to the exhausting theater of social personas. Once you truly see the elaborate performance we all engage in, you can never unsee it. Every conversation becomes a stage, every interaction a carefully choreographed dance of expectations and responses. The awakened being watches as people frantically adjust their masks depending on who they're speaking with, shifting personalities like changing clothes. Have you ever noticed how much energy we spend trying to convince others of who we are? We curate our appearance, rehearse our stories, and calibrate our reactions, all to maintain a specific image. We perform happiness at parties while carrying grief. We perform confidence in meetings while harboring doubt. We perform interest in conversations while our minds wander elsewhere. The social world demands these performances. It rewards them. But at what cost? You see, the awakened soul recognizes this cost intimately. They've paid it themselves, perhaps for decades. They understand the profound exhaustion that comes from maintaining a persona that isn't aligned with one's true nature. And once they see through this game, they can no longer play it with the same conviction. They see how we compete for validation through subtle signals of status and accomplishment. They observe the constant seeking of approval that underlies so many of our interactions. They recognize the fear of rejection that drives our careful self-editing. They see it. They feel it. They know it. And something within them naturally begins to step back from this theater of shadows. Think about it. If you suddenly realized you were at a costume party where everyone had forgotten they were wearing costumes and now believed themselves to be the characters they portrayed, wouldn't you feel a natural impulse to create some space? Not because you dislike the partygoers, but because you see the unnecessary suffering caused by their forgetting. We walk around so convinced of our social identities. I am a doctor. I am a mother. I am successful. I am a failure. We attach to these labels with such seriousness, defending them, polishing them, fighting over them. The awakened being sees this with a kind of bemused compassion. They understand these identities are useful fictions, convenient handles for practical purposes, but not the essence of who we are. But here's the thing. This seeing doesn't make them arrogant. It makes them gentle. Because they recognize that they too participated in this dance. They too forgot. And occasionally, they still forget and get pulled back into the performance. The difference is that they now have the awareness to notice when it's happening. They can smile at their own social persona like a parent might smile at a child's earnest play. The clarity of uncluttered awareness. The second reason for this quiet distancing lies in the awakened being's natural gravitation toward mental clarity. As inner awareness expands, there arises a natural desire for less stimulation, less noise, less clutter. This isn't about becoming a hermit. It's about recognizing how much of our social engagement actually clutters our mental space rather than enhancing it. The awakened soul begins to notice how many interactions leave them feeling drained rather than energized, confused rather than clarified, contracted rather than expanded. Not because the people they engage with are bad or wrong, but because the nature of conventional social exchange often operates at the level of persona rather than presence. You see, there's a profound relationship between inner silence and external quietude. As one cultivates stillness within, one begins to naturally seek conditions that support that stillness without. This isn't escapism, it's alignment. Think of awareness as a clear pool of water. When the water is still, it perfectly reflects reality as it is. The moon, the stars, the passing clouds all appear with perfect clarity on its surface. But when the water is agitated, stirred up by winds and debris, these reflections become distorted, fragmented, unrecognizable. The awakened being values the clarity of their awareness pool. They've tasted what it's like to see reality undistorted by the agitation of unnecessary mental and emotional activity. And they naturally orient toward conditions that support this clarity. I knew someone once, a woman who had built an impressive network of hundreds of social connections, professional contacts, and acquaintances. Her calendar was perpetually full. Her phone constantly buzzed with notifications. She measured her worth by the vibrancy of her social life. But after a profound awakening experience, she began to simplify. Not in one dramatic gesture, but gradually, naturally, like a tree shedding leaves in autumn. She didn't announce this change. She didn't make a show of deleting her social media accounts or changing her phone number. She simply stopped engaging in interactions that didn't feel aligned with her deepest truth. Over time, her vast network distilled down to a handful of authentic connections. And in that space of simplicity, she discovered relationships of a depth she had never known possible. Water seeks its own level. The awakened being, having touched the depths of awareness, naturally seeks experiences that match that depth. Small talk becomes increasingly unsatisfying. Social events centered around status and appearance lose their appeal. Activities designed to fill time rather than fulfill being seem increasingly hollow. But here again lies a beautiful paradox. This apparent withdrawal often leads to more authentic connection, not less. When we remove the noise of superficial social engagement, we create space for relationships of genuine depth and meaning. We discover that less can indeed be more. Fewer connections of greater depth bring more fulfillment than many connections that barely scratch the surface of our being. Now, the third reason might surprise you, because it contradicts everything we've been taught about spiritual awakening. Compassionate witnessing. The third and perhaps most profound reason awakened souls create this quiet distance around themselves stems from what I can only describe as compassionate witnessing. This is the aspect of awakening that is most frequently misunderstood, most commonly mistaken for indifference, aloofness, or even spiritual bypassing. But nothing could be further from the truth. The awakened being doesn't distance themselves because they reject others or feel superior to them. They step back because they see too clearly. They witness the suffering, the conditioning, the unconscious patterns that govern human behavior with such crystalline clarity that it would be impossible, even cruel, to continue engaging in the old familiar ways. I have observed this in my own journey. When you truly see the depth of another's conditioning, when you recognize the invisible chains that bind them to repetitive patterns of thought and behavior, there arises a natural compassion that doesn't rush to fix, change, or save them. This compassion understands something essential about human awakening. It cannot be forced. It cannot be given. It cannot be taught. It can only be invited, witnessed, held in a space of unconditional acceptance. What if I told you that the most loving thing you can sometimes do is to step back and allow others their journey? What if true compassion sometimes looks like non-intervention? What if the greatest gift you can offer another is not your wisdom, not your solutions, not your healing methods, but your absolute trust in their own innate capacity to find their way? The awakened being understands this at a visceral level. They recognize that every attempt to fix another, to improve them, to guide them toward awakening is, at some level, a subtle form of violence. It implies that the other is broken, insufficient, lost, and perpetuates the very sense of separation it claims to address. Can you see how this distance might be the most profound respect one could offer? Can you feel the difference between withdrawing in judgment versus stepping back in deep reverence for another's process? Can you sense how this kind of space creating is actually the opposite of abandonment? The paradox here is extraordinary. The awakened soul's apparent distance is actually a form of deeper presence. By not interfering, by not imposing their perspective, by not trying to change what they witness, they offer others the rare gift of being fully seen and fully accepted exactly as they are. This is not the cold detachment of indifference. This is the warm spaciousness of unconditional love. I've witnessed people desperately trying to awaken others, preaching, teaching, insisting, cajoling. So much effort, so much strain, so much implicit judgment in their helping. And I've witnessed the quiet power of those who simply embody their awakening, who create around themselves a field of awareness and acceptance that naturally invites others into their own recognition. No effort, no strain, no judgment, just presence, just being. The truly awakened understand that forcing their perspective on others would simply be another expression of ego, another form of the very unconsciousness they have seen beyond. They recognize that the ego loves nothing more than to appropriate spiritual awakening as its latest and greatest achievement, its most impressive costume. I am awakened. I am enlightened. I am more evolved, and you are not. The absurdity of this position becomes self-evident once true awakening occurs. This is why awakened beings so often appear ordinary, unassuming, quiet in their expression. They aren't hiding their light. They're allowing it to shine without the ego's amplification. They aren't withholding their wisdom. They're offering it in the most direct way possible. Through being rather than doing. Through presence rather than performance. True compassion recognizes that each soul has its own timing, its own path, its own unique way of awakening. There is no formula, no technique that works for all, no universal prescription for consciousness evolution. What catalyzed my awakening might be completely irrelevant to yours. What opened my eyes might leave yours firmly shut. The awakened being sees this, honors this, respects this profound uniqueness of each individual journey. And so they create space. They step back. They allow. Not from lack of care, but from its abundance. Not from indifference, but from the deepest respect. Not from cold detachment, but from the warmest acceptance. They understand that true help never looks like imposition. It never assumes to know what another needs. It never presumes superior wisdom or greater evolution. It simply offers presence, offers witnessing, offers a quiet reflection of the other's own inherent wholeness back to them. I've felt the difference between these approaches. I've experienced the subtle violence of someone trying to awaken me, to fix me, to improve me according to their vision of what I should become. And I've experienced the exquisite freedom of being in the presence of someone who simply witnesses me, accepts me, creates space for my own innate intelligence to emerge in its own time, in its own way. The difference is profound. One contracts, one expands, one diminishes, one empowers, one creates dependency, one fosters autonomy, one reinforces separation, one invites recognition of our shared being. This is why the awakened soul's apparent withdrawal is actually the most authentic form of engagement possible. Their quiet distance is not absence, but a different quality of presence. Not remoteness, but a more subtle form of intimacy. Not abandonment, but the deepest form of trust. You see, when we truly understand this perspective, we begin to recognize that what appears as withdrawal may be the most authentic engagement possible. You see, when we truly understand this perspective, we begin to recognize that what appears as withdrawal may be the most authentic engagement possible. The quiet distance created by awakened souls is not a rejection of life or others, but rather a profound shift in how they participate in the human experience. We return now to where we began, but with eyes that can see more clearly, hearts that can understand more deeply. What if I told you that the most awakened souls among us aren't announcing their enlightenment on mountaintops not because they have nothing to share, but because they have discovered a more profound way of sharing? Think about it. The awakened being recognizes the exhausting theater of social performance, seeks the clarity of uncluttered awareness, and engages in compassionate witnessing rather than compulsive fixing. These three qualities naturally create a different kind of presence in the world, one that may appear as withdrawal to those still fully immersed in conventional patterns of relating. But here's the thing. This distance is actually the closest form of connection possible between human beings. When I step back from engaging with your persona, your social mask, your carefully constructed identity, I create space for something much more authentic to emerge. I refuse to relate to the fiction of who you think you are, and instead hold space for the reality of your true nature to reveal itself. There is more intimacy in this kind of relating than in 1,000 conventional interactions that never penetrate beyond the surface of our being. Like that mountain stream we spoke of earlier, still on the surface yet deep with current beneath. The awakened soul moves through the world with a power that doesn't need to announce itself. But now we can see that this stillness is not disengagement. It is presence distilled to its essence. It is connection purified of its conditioning. It is love freed from its attachments and expectations. The conventional view tells us that withdrawal is negative, that distance is cold, that stepping back is rejection. But we have transformed this understanding. We now see that the awakened soul's quiet distance is born of the deepest respect for our true nature. It is a form of reverence so profound that it refuses to engage with anything less than our authentic being. It is a love so pure that it will not participate in the very patterns that keep us bound in suffering. The quiet presence of truly awakened beings creates a field around them, a space of possibility where others can begin to awaken to their own nature. Not through preaching or teaching or fixing, but through the simple power of being in the presence of someone who is fully present, fully authentic, fully alive. Their distance from conventional patterns of relating actually creates the optimal conditions for genuine connection to emerge. You see, this distance isn't permanent. It isn't rigid. It isn't absolute. It's a natural phase in the awakening process, a recalibration of how one engages with the world after seeing through the illusions that govern most human interaction. As this new way of being stabilizes, there often emerges a natural movement back toward engagement, but engagement of an entirely different quality, one that comes from freedom rather than compulsion, from abundance rather than lack, from wholeness rather than fragmentation. Perhaps you yourself have been feeling this pull toward quieter ways of being, toward less social engagement, toward more solitude and simplicity. Perhaps you've worried that something is wrong with you, that you're becoming antisocial or depressed or disconnected. But let me ask you something. What if this quiet distancing you feel isn't a rejection of life, but your soul's way of making space for a more authentic way of being in the world? I've seen this process unfold in many who are awakening. There comes a natural falling away of relationships, activities, and engagements that no longer align with their deepening awareness. This can be disorienting, even frightening at first. We've been taught that more connection is always better, that broader social networks signal success, that constant engagement is healthy. But the awakening being recognizes that quality of connection matters infinitely more than quantity. Depth of engagement matters more than frequency. Authenticity of interaction matters more than social approval. The truly awakened soul doesn't need to proclaim its wisdom from mountaintops because it recognizes that the most powerful teaching happens in the space of being rather than the noise of doing. It creates a gentle field of awareness where authentic being can flourish, unencumbered by the constant demands of collective illusions. And in doing so, it offers others the greatest gift possible. Not answers or solutions or methods, but space. Space to discover their own truth. Space to awaken in their own way. Space to recognize what has always been present beneath the noise of conditioned existence. So perhaps the next time you encounter someone who seems to be quietly withdrawing from the conventional patterns of social engagement, you might see them with new eyes. Perhaps instead of assuming they are rejecting life, you might consider that they are embracing it more fully, but on different terms. Perhaps instead of seeing their distance as coldness, you might recognize it as a form of warmth so pure that it refuses to participate in anything less than authentic connection. The more conscious we become, the more carefully we choose how and where to place our energy, not out of judgment or superiority, but out of respect for the precious nature of awareness itself, not out of fear or avoidance, but out of recognition of what truly matters, not out of rejection of others, but out of profound love for their essential nature beneath all masks and conditioning. This quiet distancing isn't withdrawal from life. It is a profound shift in how one participates in it. It isn't rejection of connection. It is an insistence on connection of a different quality. It isn't isolation from humanity. It is a recognition of what truly connects us beneath all our apparent differences. The awakened soul doesn't distance itself because it has transcended humanity. It creates space because it has embraced humanity at a level most cannot yet recognize. It has seen through the games without judging the players. It has recognized the patterns without rejecting those caught in them. It has transcended the need to fix or change or improve what it witnesses. And in that spacious transcendence, it offers the most profound invitation possible. Not through words or teachings or techniques, but through its very being. An invitation to join it in the quiet recognition of what we have always been, beneath the noise of all our becoming.